My upbringing turned into a little unorthodox. I grew up in a Southern Baptist household, the kind where we didn't trust in ghosts, however, had been certain approximately demons. Let me provide an explanation for. If something strange occurred, it wasn't a spirit or wandering soul. It turned into something darker, something biblical. I was in no way completely sold into it. However, the message was drilled into me from a young age. Rejecting demons intended rejecting scripture itself. My mom, even though, became extraordinary. Faith changed into elective for her. She wasn't atheist or agnostic, just indifferent. She'd say things like, "God and I have an understanding." On every occasion I pressed her about church. Even as I leaned into faith as a source of structure and balance, she drifted in addition from it. It turned into one of the many things that widened the gap between us. I might not sugarcoat it. My mother struggled with addiction, intellectual fitness problems, things she never wanted help for. Some days, she became purposeful. Others, she became downright insane. I tried not to take it individually, but it turned into difficult. Searching again, she certainly had schizophrenia or a few types of adjacent circumstance. But before you assert something about my family being neglectful of her intellectual fitness, it was a distinctive time back then. One afternoon, I had a nightmare so bright that I nonetheless consider every detail to this present day. Within the dream, I was lying in bed when my mom stormed into my room, screaming in a state of rage. She grabbed me by way of the wrist and started shaking me violently. I woke up in a pool of sweat, my body still rigid with fear. But earlier than I could shake off the dream, it occurred again. Besides, this time I wasn't asleep. The door barged open, and there she becomes simply as she had been in my nightmare. Equal expression, equal unhinged anger, equal phrases. It turned into like the dream had been some kind of prophecy. I barely managed to push her off and yell for her to prevent, and then it became over. She left as suddenly as she had entered, and after I confronted her the subsequent morning, she had no memory of it. She regarded me as burdened, even a bit harmed that I was so shaken. I informed myself it changed into a coincidence, some weird overlap between my unconscious and her moods. But part of me questioned if it changed into something worse. A few weeks later, I heard her screaming from the backyard. It changed into an unusual sound, not a panicked scream, or maybe a distressed one. The scream sounded more excited. I do not even recognize if that makes me feel, but that's the finest manner I'm able to describe it. I rushed out of doors and froze at what I noticed. My mother became status inside the backyard, grinning, conserving a massive 7-foot-long snake in her naked arms. That became terrifying enough on its own. However, there may be something you do not know, which made it even worse. My mom had a lifelong phobia of snakes. She couldn't even examine them on TV without recoiling. But there she turned into, gripping one love, it turned into a toy. She stated, "Come here," in motion for me to grab the snake. I took a step, returned, shaking my head. I literally said, "Mother, what the hell?" But the appearance in her eye advised me she could not even recognize the words I was pronouncing. She just smiled wider and tilted her head like she changed into trying to scare me. I could not deal with it. I grew to become and ran, returned inner, slamming the door in the back of me. My coronary heart became pounding. I peeked out the window and noticed her nonetheless standing there, conserving the snake like in presenting. Sooner or later, she let it slither onto the floor and returned inside, as though not anything had happened. Later, once I requested her about it, she shrugged like I become making it up. She advised me I should have had a bizarre dream and refused to entertain me. Once I persisted to invite approximately it, that become not anything compared to what I'm approximately to tell you though. That iciness. My church held an in a single day lock-in. I was relieved to move. Church became my breakout, a place wherein I may be round predictable, everyday humans. My mom dropped me off, absolutely sober, or even kissed my forehead earlier than driving away. At round 4:30 a.m., just as we have been settling into sleep, a loud knocking echoed through the chapel. All of us sat up, glancing at every other. The knocking moved, traveling across the constructing in an impossible way. At times, it sounded fine. It was irresistible coming from more than one instructions right now. It wasn't wind. It wasn't an animal. It changed into rhythmic, circling the chapel like someone or something became trying to interrupt inside. The pastor, the only one with a key, was asleep in his office and hadn't heard an element. I ran to wake him, and as quickly as he stepped into the chapel, the knocking stopped. He opened the front doorways and stumbled back in fear. Status there, barefoot and sweating within the freezing air, became my mom. Her clothes had been matted, and her hair had changed into dripping with sweat. Her lips have been trembling, but I could not listen to what she was saying. She did not acknowledge the pastor. Her eyes locked on me. At once, a sluggish, unsettling smile stretched across her face as she walked closer to me. I wanted to run. The pastor attempted to keep me again, whispering, "Stay right here." But I felt powerless, like I had no preference but to go along with her. I climbed into the auto, afraid that she was going to do something, but she failed to become silent in the drive domestic. She did not communicate, did not explain. She didn't answer once I asked why she was there. When we were given domestic, she stopped within the doorway and just stared at me. She stood there silently, looking me as I walked to my room. I closed the door, locked it, and lay wide awake for hours, listening. Within the morning, she was in the kitchen cooking breakfast. She changed into joyful and oblivious to what had happened the night before. She jumped again while she noticed me, pronouncing that she was about to pick me up from the church. I felt the blood drain from my face. She had no reminiscence of knocking on the church doorways, no reminiscence of using my home. It became freaky. I anticipated a person, the pastor, a church elder, even one of the chaplain, to say something about what had come about. However, no one did. It became like they didn't recognize what to make of it, or worse, they did not need to. It is sort of the way people handled my mother's return then. That became many years ago. She's long gone now, but her memory is something to never depart me, for better or for worse. I do not recognize if I accept as true the demons or the supernatural anymore, but I cannot explain what happened. The logical rationalization is that she was stricken by mental infection, maybe addiction withdrawal, or perhaps something else. However, the memory lapses, the eerie timing, the manner she acted like an extraordinary person some nights. It still haunts me. I tell myself there is a rational answer for all of it, but even now, I'm now not positive I believe that.